So let me ask you one question right now. In 10 years, what would you be doing in your life that would make it the most fulfilling as possible? So I feel like the natural go-to answer to that question for most people, myself included, would just be to be well off. And what that looks like is basically having a house, working a very well-paying job, having a family perhaps, and just generally being financially free and not having to worry about a lot of things that we have to worry about now. So honestly, I feel like there's still something missing about that. And I feel like this potentially feels boring because it feels like I have the rest of my life figured out. I don't know if that's something that I really deem as fulfilling. So that's something that I really want to get into today. And to answer that for myself, I'm going to dive into what fulfillment really means for myself. All right, so what did fulfillment look like for me back in high school? I think most of that was just from video games. Like a lot of my enjoyment stemmed from the the unpredictability that I'd get from video games. And for me, I felt like I had that active progress where I was always building upon something, getting experience maybe, or learning something new, or beating a new opponent every time. There's always like that progression or that climb that you get with video games, and every time you're reaching like that new high, which is what kept me engaged personally. So that unlimited dynamic growth, and for a lot of video games you'd have to figure things out on the fly. It felt more like you were challenging yourself at the same time as growing. So I think a good example of that is first person shooter games. Like it's all about strategy at the end of the day, but it's also about skill. And it feels like you have a lot of different branches that you can grow your knowledge of the game in, and it just feels like a very long fun progression where you're always actively trying to learn something new and build up. Okay, so I think that brings me to the conclusion that video games are dynamic. And because they're dynamic, that's what makes them interesting and relatively fulfilling for me when I was in high school. Now, I didn't really hang out too much in high school, but I think for the people that did, they were probably chasing some relatively similar feeling of unpredictability. Like, I'm sure nobody would hang out with other people if it was the same thing over and over again either. Like, because it's dynamic, because we hang out with different people to see their different perspectives, and we grow together and we learn from each other, that's why it's a very interesting experience. It's not just the same thing when you're hanging out even with the same people, because you're learning new stuff about them all the time. There's always something new to talk about or do, or some new activity to explore. So another example of why predictable things tend to feel less fulfilling is with Cookie Clicker. So Cookie Clicker is a game where all you do is basically click on a cookie and you gain these in-game cookies. That's the currency of the game. And you could spend those cookies on making more cookies, and you basically just build up your own cookie empire. So there was one option in the game called Ruin the Fun. And basically all it does is gives you all the cookies in the world. And that takes the fun out of the game because you already know what's going to happen when you do that. You're just going to win. You're going to have all the unlimited resources, but it's not going to be interesting anymore because you've stopped doing the process of playing the game itself. When you do the process of playing the game, that's when it feels unpredictable because you have to make all these choices and these decisions to determine what's your next step. But when you ruin the fun, you have all the steps laid out for you. It doesn't feel fulfilling anymore because it's all there. There's nothing else to do. And that nothing else to do part feels like, okay, I just have everything. What am I supposed to do next, I guess? Now, on a side note, I think a piece of me wanted to be like a pro gamer, I suppose, during high school. And that's why I also wanted to play games, because I felt like I was working towards something. I had a goal. Now, I know I wasn't going to be one, but it felt interesting to have that feeling of a side hustle where I was working towards something outside of just school, where I saw in school my purpose was, predictably as it was, to just go to college, get a job. And that idea of YouTube or gaming as another path in my life, as like a, not an alternative, but a parallel path, it introduced something slightly different that was unique. And I think that's why a lot of kids say that, oh, I want to be a YouTuber. It's because it's not something that's traditional. It feels more unorthodox. And that's why, because it's different, it feels more interesting or valuable or maybe even fulfilling. So, transitioning to college, my perception on fulfillment changed a lot in this past year because I feel like I was exposed to so many people at once and so many different perspectives at the same time. This really brought to me like an overwhelming sense of dynamicness again, because I'm always surrounded by really talented and motivated people on campus, and I feel like all of them have this deep intensity for knowledge about some specific topic that they're interested in. There's people that know hella hardware. They know how to build printed circuit boards and like all these electronic components and put them together. There's people that know how to do all this software stuff, and the things that they do are like really magical, like all the things that they can build with just a computer. And then there's even people like my roommate who really love chess, and it's just really interesting to see all these people who are really motivated about a specific topic. So on the jobs side of things, there's also plenty of people at college who are really, really trying to get into a specific job. So I know people recruiting for startups, big tech jobs, even quant, right? There's people running clubs and organizations. Like they're all very passionate about chasing this specific thing. And I know a lot of these things I listed are more relevant for someone with a computer background or a tech background, but I think it applies for really any field for anyone in college, because in college you're just exposed to so many things. So how does this really change my perception on fulfillment? Because I see everyone around me that has a shared purpose of trying to achieve something, it's kind of motivated me to not really take that from other people or copy them, but to adopt it into my own life. You know, I'm in college right now because obviously I want to get a job too. I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to build up my education, make my resume stronger, etc. But I think about all the time, like what type of job is even the most fulfilling, right? So there's this negative connotation of the 9 to 5 job, which is like, oh, I'll punch in to work, I'll do my work, I'll punch out, I'll go home, and that's when I can actually do the things that fulfill me the most. And I feel like for most people, you know, I fall under this umbrella too, where it's like, am I really trying to do this job here? You know, I see it as sometimes like a means to an end, where it's just one step towards financial freedom or being well off, where I can get all the money that I need. And only then can I really do the stuff that I want to do with my life. And that feels kind of cheap. Like, I feel like it's not the best use of time. Like, I could be doing something on my job that's equally fulfilling. So I just need to find a way to make that fulfilling and make that feeling of fulfillment on the job. So I guess one reason why the 9 to 5 job feels bad to some people is because it introduces that feeling of a routine, right? Again, it's predictable. You have to follow that all the time. And it's like you have the rest of your life figured out again, where you're like, okay, I'm just going to wake up, go to my job, and punch out at the end of the day. And honestly, that's not so bad if it's a job that you actually enjoy. I don't think like a 9 to 5 job for everyone is just bad. There are good 9 to 5 jobs out there that make you very fulfilled from the work that you're doing. But there's also bad ones too, and that's the thing that really determines how fulfilled you feel sometimes. So a little bit background about me and my experience with a 9 to 5 job or like an industry kind of environment. During my first year at school, which was last year, I was on a project team at school, an engineering project team where we basically built electric cars and then we'd go out and race them. I thought that it was a very fun experience. Like, I learned a lot, but I realized that wasn't necessarily the thing that I wanted to do, because I feel like I was just building something for someone else. I feel like I didn't have that purpose when I was there, and that's when it started to feel like work. Like before, in the first semester when I did it, I was having a lot of fun because I was learning all about the team. I was learning all about the members. I felt like I was really engaged the whole time because there was something new to do at every corner. But then towards the second semester, I feel like I had my project all settled out. And to me, the project felt a little bit more boring because we were just buying new parts and debugging, and it felt like the solution to that was just, okay, I'll fix everything with buying another part. I feel like I fell off a little bit because going to the project team center, and doing my work there felt more like a chore rather than work. Like I felt like I was literally punching in, punching out. And to me, that feeling of a means to an end that a lot of people get from their jobs was just getting things on my resume and getting an internship perhaps, or getting good work experience. Like that was what I was there for. And I realized having that motivation isn't necessarily the thing that you want. Now it works for some people, but I feel like in this case, I felt like I had a lot of better things I could be doing that also built up my resume in college. So that's why I made the decision to leave. And I don't regret that. I think I really enjoyed the people there. I respect the people that hustle on there, and it's a really great place to be. But I realized it's not for me, and my level of fulfillment was just slightly different than other people. Like I had different priorities, basically. So really, I'd argue that a predictable routine without a purpose is what comes at the cost of my fulfillment. It's like doing the same tasks over and over again that feel like they're not amounting to anything. For example, I work out and keep a routine like that, but the reason why it's different and it does give me fulfillment is because I'm actively building up towards something. I'm building more muscle. I'm keeping myself healthy, and having that goal there, having that purpose is what makes me fulfilled, even when it's something like a routine. Now, with the project team example, I felt less fulfilled because my purpose wasn't really there. I feel like I had more things that I could be achieving if I wasn't there. And that's what made it less fulfilling to me. So you wonder why people do their jobs and they don't just try. And I feel like it's because they don't care. They're not getting that fulfillment out of the job itself. For example, you could be doing retail, but a lot of people that do retail, they probably just go there and do the bare minimum. It's likely because they care less about the job. They don't find it as fulfilling. They're using it as a means to an end. Like most people are probably just doing it to make money. Like I was a lifeguard. The people around me, they didn't put as much effort into doing their job. Now for me, I felt like my purpose there as a lifeguard was to protect other people. And I felt like that was a very important thing to be keeping in mind when I was on the job. So that's why I took my job seriously, because I felt like I had that goal, that intention to do what I had to do. And I think the difference between people that really enjoy their jobs versus people who don't is because they found some way to introduce fulfillment, possibly through unpredictable learning, for example. Like I would find it very interesting if I would be able to learn a lot of new things on the job and work on a lot of dynamic problems on a job. And I know this sounds very general, but that's because it is. You could be doing so many different things on the job, and if as long as you feel like it helps you achieve your purpose, I feel like that'll feel more fulfilling to you. So I've thought about what type of jobs are good for myself between really big tech industries versus a startup environment. And I think for startup environments, you get more of that fulfillment because if you're going to be in that position, you're going to really want to chase that problem and build for the startup. Like you're going to have to align yourself with that problem, and you're going to be learning a lot on the job. Whereas in big tech industries, sometimes it's a little bit harder because that's like your typical 9-to-5 job. Not everyone in there is going to be chasing the same thing as you are. Some people are just there to make bank and roll around in their money, and that's perfectly fine because that's their priority. That's not saying all big tech jobs aren't fulfilling. Like you can definitely learn a lot more on the job too, and I think being able to do a lot more in a job environment is what makes it more interesting, provided you aren't overworking yourself, right? But if you're learning a lot more with that balance, that gives you that dynamic feeling of fulfillment because you feel like you're always doing something different. And I think that's what I really want to be looking for when it comes to finding a job that really feels less like work and more like something that I actually enjoy. Like something my friend said was, you can always love your job, but it won't love you back. I think if you don't treat your job like it's a job, you'll never get to that point in the first place. So my answer to the question that I posed at the beginning of the video, and as well as like my theory for what human fulfillment really looks like, is creation. I think it comes down to making things and being endlessly curious to learn or do something at all. Because I feel like when you're building something of your own, whether that be a website, whether you're drawing or making a YouTube video, for example, you get to put your skills together and apply them in a more dynamic way. And then that propels you to want to learn more things because you're like, I want to learn more things so I can build more things. And when you're in this positive cycle, you just keep growing and growing and growing. and that keeps your life more engaging and fulfilling. So some examples that I have off the top of my head are like academia or inventors. So for people in academia, like professors, for example, they're really invested in their field and they want to do whatever it takes to find and discover new knowledge and share that with other people. And because that knowledge is new, like they're literally learning things just so they can find new things to learn. And with inventors, they're, again, like I said, applying their new skills, learning more skills, building with those skills, and then repeating. That loop is what keeps them hooked. It's what keeps them engaged, just like a video game, really. There's just a lot of progress to be made and a lot of progress that someone wants to build up in that area. So really, in today's world, I feel like that comes from grounding yourself in that specific purpose where you can continue to create and build things. Like if you're just creating things without a real purpose and you don't feel like you align with that, it's not going to be as effective as if you have a purpose for doing something that you're making. Like if you were building a website like a study tracker and you really wanted to study better, I guarantee you'd probably be way more likely to finish that project than if you were just building a random website that you don't really care about. And I think that's why that's why I see the parallel with jobs, because some people see themselves making things on the job for people that they don't care about or for a product they don't care about. But for example, in startups, people really care about the problem. They're very passionate about what they're building as well, and they want that solution to be implemented in society because it has their name on it at the end of the day too. It's something that they made themselves. So that, yes, this kind of leans into hobbies, right? People say that it's good for your soul. It's something that you can see yourself getting lost in. Like for me, that's piano. I find it fulfilling because it's a way for myself to release. It's a reward system for myself. When I get back to the dorm some nights, I'll just play some piano for an hour. Then boom, I feel like way more refreshed. I feel way better because again, I'm working towards something. I'm playing a new piece. I'm feeling that fulfillment because it's like an artistic drive in a sense. Before I leave, just like a couple of nuances to creating things. I feel like I don't always want to be an extreme passion chaser for what I'm doing. Like, yes, it's good to have that purpose and ground myself there, but there's times that I can't always be chasing that. Like, I'm going to need to take a break at some point just so I can continue to do what I'm doing. Learning to take care of yourself, right, is what it comes down to at the end of the day. And that's an also very important skill to prioritize and keep in mind. And I feel like there's that spectrum to really fully committing to something you love. You're not always going to be like 100% on a specific project or a specific thing that you want to do. Like sometimes it'll be 80%, 70%. But as long as you have that minimum bar for yourself and you have that level of commitment for the thing that you want to do, I feel like you'll be able to gain as much fulfillment as you can out of that experience. And, in real life, we'll always have commitments to things that we don't really love. And those are just the things that we're obligated to do. Those are the things that are just a means to an end. I think it's the other fulfilling goal in life to really chase the things that you love after you have that access as well. Because what's most important is we have that access first before we start doing other things. And once we have that stable foundation, we can just build and grow and do whatever the hell we want with the rest of our lives. All right, that's all I have for this week. I'll see you guys later. Peace.